The imperial palace of the Draven Empire was falling apart, and everyone knew it. 3 baby dragons, each roughly the size of a full-grown mastiff, were tearing through the ancient marble halls like tiny tornadoes made of scales and fire. Their shrieks echoed off crystal walls that had stood for 10,000 years. Tapestries that had survived wars and revolutions were now nothing but smoking ash on the floor. Emperor Kraloth stood in the observation gallery, his 4 golden eyes watching the chaos below with an expression that could only be described as pure defeat. This was the 6th team of caregivers in 3 weeks. The 6th failure. And he was running out of options fast. The first team had been Voidborn, those elegant telepathic beings who could read thoughts across star systems. They'd lasted exactly 4 hours before collapsing in screaming heaps, their minds completely overwhelmed by the chaotic, primal thoughts of 3 terrified baby dragons. 2 of them were still in the medical wing, recovering from the mental damage. Then came the Titan-class warriors, massive beings bred for combat with armor thicker than starship hulls. Surely they could handle 3 little dragons, right? Wrong. The hatchlings had bitten clean through their supposedly impenetrable plating. 1 warrior still walked with a limp, and he was 8 feet tall and weighed half a ton. The 3rd attempt had been the ancient wise ones, those floating scholars who'd lived for millennia and claimed to understand all living things in the galaxy. They'd brought meditation crystals and ancient calming rituals. The dragons had eaten the crystals and set the wise ones' robes on fire. That attempt lasted 2 hours. After that came the frost shepherds, the flame dancers, and the harmony singers. All failures. All expensive failures. And now the Emperor was watching his last hope literally run away down the corridor, their protective suits still smoking. Meanwhile, 3 floors down in the diplomatic wing's nursery, Katie Walsh was having a pretty normal Tuesday. She'd been hired 6 months ago as a pediatric nurse to take care of the various ambassadors' children. It was good work, decent pay, and the alien kids were actually pretty cute once you got used to the extra arms or tentacles or whatever. She was cleaning up after snack time when the security feed on the wall lit up with emergency alerts. Katie glanced at it and froze. 3 small dragons were literally bouncing off walls while palace guards ran for their lives. 1 dragon was hanging from a chandelier. Another was trying to eat a marble statue. The 3rd was just screaming at the top of its lungs for no apparent reason. "Wow," Katie muttered. "Someone's having a bad day. You there, human?" Katie nearly jumped out of her skin. She spun around to find Emperor Kraloth himself standing in the doorway of her nursery. The most powerful being in 12 star systems was ducking his head to fit through her doorframe. "Your Majesty," Katie said, quickly straightening up and trying not to look as terrified as she felt. The Emperor moved closer, and Katie could see something she never expected to see on the face of a galactic ruler. Desperation. Pure, simple desperation. "Tell me," he said, his voice dropping low, "do your kind have any methods for dealing with unruly young? Any techniques at all?" Behind him, the court advisors had gathered in the hallway. Katie could hear them snickering. One of them, a tall crystalline being, whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Primitive mammals and their crude techniques. This is what we've come to." Another one laughed. "Next he'll be asking the janitor droids for advice." Katie felt her jaw tighten. She'd heard this kind of talk before. Humans were considered the bargain bin species of the galaxy. Sure, they were useful for basic labor and simple tasks, but anything requiring real sophistication? Everyone knew humans were just too primitive. She looked at the security feed again. 3 baby dragons, absolutely terrified out of their minds, being treated like weapons instead of children. Then she looked at the Emperor, who despite all his power and technology and supposed advancement, clearly had no idea what to do. Katie crossed her arms and made a decision that would either get her fired or get her killed. Maybe both. "Give me 24 hours alone with them," she said. "Everyone out. No cameras, no guards watching through windows, no interference whatsoever." The Emperor's translator, a small floating device, actually stuttered. That's suicide. They've already injured warriors twice your size." One of the advisors laughed out loud. "The human thinks she can do what the wise ones could not." How entertaining. Katie didn't take her eyes off the Emperor. "That's my condition, Your Majesty. Take it or leave it. But I'm telling you right now, those babies aren't going to calm down with an audience." Emperor Kraloth stared at her for a long moment. His 4 eyes studied her face, probably looking for any sign of fear or hesitation. Katie kept her expression steady, even though her heart was hammering in her chest. Finally the Emperor nodded slowly. 24 hours. But if you die, your species will demand compensation." Katie shrugged. "If I die, I won't really care about the paperwork. The heavy metal door sealed behind Katie with a hiss that sounded way too final for comfort. The containment chamber was massive, probably the size of a basketball court, with walls made of some kind of reinforced crystal that supposedly could withstand starship weapons. Right now, it just looked like a very expensive prison. The smell hit her first. Sulfur, like someone had been lighting matches for hours straight, mixed with something else. Fear. Katie had worked in pediatric wards long enough to recognize that smell. It was the same scent that clung to hospital rooms when kids were terrified and no one was helping them feel safe. 3 baby dragons were scattered across the room, each one pressed into a different corner like they were trying to disappear into the walls. The crimson one, all red scales and sharp angles, was on her left. The obsidian one, black as midnight with eyes like molten gold, was directly ahead. The silver one, shimmering like liquid mercury, was on her right. All 3 were hissing at absolutely nothing, their heads whipping around at shadows and sounds only they could hear. Katie didn't try to approach them. She didn't call out or make soothing noises. She just walked to the center of the room, sat down cross-legged on the cold floor and went completely still. And then she waited. 1 minute passed. Then 5. Then 10. Her legs started to cramp a little, but she didn't move. She just sat there, breathing slowly, keeping her hands relaxed on her knees. The dragons kept hissing, but she noticed their heads turning toward her more often. They were confused. Every other creature that had entered this room had either run at them trying to grab them, or run away screaming. This weird 2-legged thing was just sitting there. Not threatening. Not fleeing. Just existing. 30 minutes in, the silver dragon stopped hissing. 45 minutes in, the obsidian one sat down, though it kept its eyes locked on her. An hour passed, then 90 minutes. Katie's back was aching now, but she didn't care. She was watching everything, and what she saw made her angrier by the minute. The room was absolutely freezing. Her breath was coming out in small clouds. She could see the dragons shivering, their scales rippling as they tried to generate body heat. These were reptilian creatures, or at least something similar. They needed warmth. Why was the room set to what felt like 50 degrees? The lighting was even worse. Harsh white strips on the ceiling flickered every few seconds, creating a strobing effect that made Katie's own eyes hurt. She couldn't imagine what it was doing to these babies with their much more sensitive vision. It was like trying to sleep in a room with a broken fluorescent light. No wonder they were freaking out. Then there was the smell. Underneath the sulfur and fear, Katie could detect something else. The stress hormones of every caregiver who'd come before her. Panic has a scent, and these dragons could definitely smell it. They'd been surrounded by terrified adults for weeks. How were they supposed to feel safe when everyone around them was broadcasting pure terror? 2 hours after sitting down, Katie finally spoke. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. "You're not monsters," she said, not looking directly at any of them. "You're just scared babies in a scary place. And I get it. This place is terrible." The crimson dragon's ear, a small triangular fin on the side of its head, twitched toward her voice. Katie pulled out her tablet slowly, making sure her movements were obvious and non-threatening. She started typing notes. Room temperature way too cold. Lighting absolutely awful. Feeding schedule. She pulled up the records and nearly laughed. They were being fed twice a day on a rigid schedule, whether they were hungry or not. Sleep patterns, according to the logs, were non-existent because no one had bothered to establish a bedtime routine. They forgot the basics, Katie muttered. All this advanced technology, and they forgot that babies need warmth, routine, and calm. She was so focused on her tablet that she almost missed the obsidian dragon moving. It wasn't walking toward her exactly. More like testing. It crept forward a few feet, then stopped. Waited. Crept forward again. Katie kept her eyes on her screen, but she was tracking it in her peripheral vision. Closer. Closer. 10 feet away. Then 5. Then it lunged. Not a full attack, Katie realized instantly. A test. The dragon snapped at her arm, but there was no real force behind it. It was doing what scared kids always do, pushing boundaries, trying to see what would happen. Katie simply moved her arm to the side, casual as anything, and kept typing. She didn't gasp or jump or yell. She just avoided the bite like she was dodging a puddle on the sidewalk. "Nice try, buddy," she said calmly. "But we're not playing that game. You want to bite something, I'll get you a chew toy later." The obsidian dragon froze, looking utterly baffled. Its head tilted to one side like it was trying to process what just happened. Every other creature had either fought back or run away. This one just dodged and kept working? Katie glanced up and made eye contact for just a second. "I'm not scared of you," she said simply. "And I'm not going to hurt you. So we can both just relax, okay?" The dragon sat down, still staring at her. After a moment, the crimson one took a tentative step away from its corner. Then the silver one did the same. Katie smiled and went back to her notes. She had 22 hours left and a lot of work to do. Hour 3 came around and Katie decided it was time to stop observing and start fixing things. She stood up slowly, her legs protesting after sitting still for so long, and walked toward the control panel near the door. All 3 dragons watched her every move, but none of them hissed. That was progress. The lighting controls took her a minute to figure out. Everything was labeled in 3 different alien languages, and she had to use her tablet's translator just to understand which button did what. Finally, she found what she was looking for. With a satisfying click, those horrible flickering overhead lights went dark. The change was immediate. All 3 dragons stopped their nervous twitching. Their scales, which had been rippling with tension, started to settle down. Katie wasn't done though. She found the thermal lamp controls and activated them. Soft, warm orange lights began glowing from panels along the walls, the kind that actually produced heat instead of just harsh white brightness. The kind that mimicked natural sunlight, or in this case, probably the warmth of a dragon's parent. Next came the temperature. Katie opened the environmental controls and started cranking up the heat. The system complained, flashing warnings about recommended settings, but she ignored them. She pushed the temperature up 15 degrees, then waited. Within minutes she could feel the difference. The room went from feeling like a freezer to feeling like a warm summer day. The dragons felt it too. The silver one actually stretched out, its wings unfolding slightly for the first time since Katie had entered the room. That was a good sign. Relaxed animals stretched. Terrified ones stayed curled up tight. But Katie had one more request. She walked to the communication panel by the door and pressed the button. A confused servant answered almost immediately. Yes? Is there an emergency? I need heated blankets, Katie said. The thick, soft kind. 3 of them. Bring them to the containment chamber door. There was a long pause. Blankets? For the dragons? Yes, blankets. For the dragons. Can you do that or not? Yes. Right away. 5 minutes later there was a knock on the door. Katie opened it just wide enough to take 3 large, heated blankets from a very confused-looking servant who kept trying to peek inside. Katie thanked him and shut the door before he could ask any questions. Now came what Katie's grandmother would have called the old-fashioned approach. The truly primitive part that all these advanced civilizations had apparently forgotten about. She took the first blanket, still warm from the heating unit, and approached the crimson dragon. It tensed up, but Katie moved slowly and kept her voice low and steady. It's okay. This is going to feel nice, I promise. She draped the blanket over the dragon's back, not wrapping it tight, just letting it rest there like a warm hug. The dragon froze for a second, then slowly relaxed into it. Katie adjusted it slightly, making sure the blanket provided gentle pressure without restricting movement. It was like swaddling a baby, something nurses learned on day 1 of pediatric training. She did the same with the obsidian dragon, then the silver one. All 3 of them now looked like bizarre, scaly burritos. And all 3 of them looked significantly calmer than they had an hour ago. Katie walked over to the wall and sat down, her back against the smooth crystal surface. She pulled her knees up slightly, making her lap into a comfortable space, and then she started humming. It was an old lullaby, one her grandmother used to sing when Katie was little and couldn't sleep. She didn't remember all the words anymore, but the melody was burned into her memory. Soft, simple, repetitive. The kind of sound that told a frightened brain that everything was safe and okay. The silver dragon heard it first. Its head lifted, ears perked up, eyes focused on Katie. It watched her for a long moment, then slowly, hesitantly, started walking toward her. Not testing this time. Just curious. Katie didn't reach out. She didn't make grabbing motions or call to it. She just kept humming and kept her arms relaxed at her sides, open and non-threatening. The dragon reached her and stopped, clearly unsure what to do next. Katie simply opened her arms a little wider, an invitation but not a demand. That was all it took. The silver dragon climbed into her lap, its warm weight settling against her stomach. It was heavier than she expected, probably 40 or 50 pounds of solid muscle and scales, but not uncomfortable. The dragon tucked its head under her chin and let out a long, shuddering breath. That's it, Katie whispered, adjusting the blanket around it. You're okay now. I've got you. Her heartbeat was steady and slow. Years of working in high-stress medical situations had taught her how to keep her heart rate down even when things were chaotic. That calm rhythm vibrated through her chest, and the dragon could feel it. Katie noticed its breathing starting to slow down, matching her own rhythm. and out, and out. Steady and safe. The obsidian dragon was next. It crawled over, blanket dragging behind it, and wedged itself between Katie's side and the wall. Then the crimson one came and flopped across her legs. All three dragons, piled on top of one human nurse who was now pinned to the floor under about 150 pounds of scaly babies. Katie's legs were going numb, her back ached, and she desperately needed to use the bathroom. But she didn't move. She just kept breathing slowly and humming that old lullaby. Hours passed. Katie fought to stay awake, knowing that if she shifted wrong or stopped humming, she might break whatever fragile trust she'd built. Her voice got quieter as exhaustion set in, but she kept going. By hour 16, all three dragons were sound asleep. Really, truly asleep, not just that light dozing they'd been doing before. Deep sleep, the kind where their bodies went completely limp and their breathing turned into soft snores. Katie finally let herself stop humming. She was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open, but she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks of working at this palace. She felt useful. She felt like she'd actually helped someone, or in this case, three someones. Outside the chamber, alarms were going off. The palace AI had been monitoring everything, and what it was seeing didn't match any known dragon behavior patterns. 3 imperial heirs, sleeping peacefully with a human. Unprecedented. Impossible. Critical. Emperor Kraloth was summoned from his quarters in the middle of the night to see something that would change everything. When the timer hit exactly 24 hours, Katie stood up as carefully as she could, trying not to wake the 3 dragons still sprawled across her. Her entire body screamed in protest. Her legs had gone numb around hour 18. Her back felt like someone had been using it as a punching bag. And she was pretty sure she'd never been this tired in her entire life, including that one time she'd worked a double shift during flu season. She managed to extract herself from the dragon pile, moving inch by inch like she was defusing a bomb. The dragons whined in their sleep and shifted around, but they didn't wake up. Small victories. Katie limped toward the door and hit the release button. The heavy metal slid open with a hiss, and she found herself staring at what looked like half the palace. The entire imperial court was crammed into the hallway, all of them pressing forward to see inside the chamber. She knew she looked absolutely terrible. Her uniform, the nice blue scrubs she'd put on yesterday, was covered in soot and scorch marks. At some point during the night, one of the dragons had sneezed fire in its sleep, and her right sleeve was completely singed off. Her hair, which had been in a neat ponytail, was now sticking out in every direction and smelled distinctly of sulfur. She probably had dragon drool on her face. She definitely had it on her shoulder. Emperor Kraloth pushed through the crowd, his 4 golden eyes wide. He looked past Katie into the chamber, where 3 baby dragons were curled up together on their heated blankets, sleeping peacefully. One of them was actually snoring. Impossible, the Emperor breathed. Katie shrugged, which made her shoulders crack in a way that was probably not healthy. Actually, it's pretty basic. They needed what all babies need. Routine. Warmth. Calm. Someone who wasn't terrified of them. High Chancellor Vexthar, the tall crystalline being who'd been mocking her yesterday, pushed forward. His expression had changed from amusement to something closer to irritation. You will teach our specialists immediately. They must learn your techniques. Katie wanted to go to bed. She wanted a shower. She wanted food and coffee and maybe a massage. But instead she nodded. Fine. Get them ready. We start in an hour. That was a week ago, and Katie was starting to think teaching might actually be harder than calming the dragons had been. The first attempt was with the Voidborn. 3 elegant telepathic beings floated into the training room, their translucent bodies shimmering with what Katie had learned was disapproval. She'd spent an hour explaining her methods, showing them how to swaddle the dragons properly, how to use body heat and steady breathing to calm them. Now, Katie said, you need to hold them. Physical contact is essential. The lead Voidborn recoiled like she'd suggested eating garbage. We do not engage in such primitive physical touching. Our telepathy is far superior for bonding. Your telepathy gave you a mental breakdown last time, Katie pointed out. These dragons need physical comfort, not mind reading. We will adapt the technique to our methods, the Voidborn said, and floated into the dragon chamber without listening to anything else Katie said. The dragons were screaming again within 5 minutes. Next came the Titan warriors. Massive, armored, and absolutely convinced they knew better. Katie showed them how to create a calm environment, how to approach slowly, how to let the dragons come to them. Discipline must come first, the lead warrior rumbled. Structure before comfort. They must learn their place. They're babies, Katie said, fighting to keep her voice level. They don't have a place yet. They're scared and they need to feel safe before they can learn anything. The warrior ignored her. He marched into the chamber like he was heading into battle and tried to physically restrain the Crimson Dragon to establish dominance. He was back out in 3 minutes, nursing a bite wound on his supposedly impenetrable armor. The wise ones were possibly the worst. They brought their meditation crystals and ancient rituals, nodding along while Katie explained her methods, and then completely ignored everything she'd said. "We have observed infant care across 10,000 species," the eldest one said. "Your simple-minded coddling may work for primitive mammals, but dragons require a more sophisticated approach." Katie watched through the observation window as they chanted and waved their crystals around. The dragons looked confused for about 30 seconds, then went back to panicking. By day 5, Katie had tried teaching 12 different specialists. None of them would actually follow her instructions. They all thought they knew better. They all believed being advanced meant making everything more complicated. They couldn't accept that sometimes the old ways worked because they were based on actual biology instead of fancy technology. High Chancellor Vexthar cornered her after the latest failure. "Your methods don't work," he accused. 6 more specialists have failed. Katie felt something snap inside her. She was exhausted, frustrated, and completely done with the attitude. "My methods work perfectly fine," she shot back. "Your specialists won't follow them. They walk in there thinking they're smarter than basic biology. They think being advanced means they can skip the fundamentals." She gestured toward the observation window, where the dragons were huddled in their corners again, stressed and scared. "Those babies don't care about your telepathy or your armor or your ancient wisdom. They need warmth, routine, and someone who actually stays calm around them. But your people are so busy being superior that they forgot how to do the simple stuff that actually matters." The Chancellor's crystalline face somehow managed to look offended. "How dare you?" "Enough." Emperor Kralitha's voice cut through the argument. He'd been watching the latest failure through the observation glass, his expression unreadable. He turned to look at Katie, then at the dragons. Then back at Katie. "Show me," he said quietly. "Go in there right now." Katie walked into the chamber. Within 2 minutes, all 3 dragons had calmed down and were clustering around her legs. She didn't do anything special. She just stayed calm, moved slowly, and treated them like the scared babies they were. The Emperor watched through the glass, and Katie could see the realization dawning on his face. The dragons weren't just responding to the techniques. They were responding to her. To something that all these advanced species had lost somewhere along the way. The throne room went completely silent when Emperor Kralitha's voice rang out. That single word, "stay," carried more weight than any lengthy speech could have. Katie looked up from the feeding station where she'd been helping the 3 dragons with their evening meal. The Crimson One had just figured out how to eat without setting the food bowl on fire, and she'd been about to celebrate that small victory. Instead, she found herself staring at the Emperor standing in the doorway, with what looked like the entire court behind him. "Your Majesty?" Katie said, carefully setting down the feeding bowl. "Stay as their primary caregiver," Kralith said, walking into the room. His 4 eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to take a step back. "Through their bonding period. And I will learn from you." The court exploded. Advisors, nobles, military commanders, everyone started shouting at once. A human teaching the Emperor? It was unthinkable. It was degrading. It violated 5,000 years of tradition. High Chancellor Vexthar looked like he might actually shatter from sheer outrage. Emperor Kralith raised one hand, and the noise cut off like someone had flipped a switch. "In 5,000 years of imperial history," he said slowly, "no bonded heirs have been this calm, this healthy, this quickly. Perhaps we have forgotten something important in our evolution. Perhaps advancement isn't just about technology." Katie felt her heart hammering in her chest. This was either the best job offer she'd ever get, or the worst trap she could walk into. But she looked at the 3 baby dragons, now crowding around her legs and making little chirping sounds, and she knew her answer. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay." The next 3 months were unlike anything Katie had ever experienced. Every morning, the Emperor himself would come to the nursery for what Katie called dragon daycare lessons. She taught him everything she'd learned in nursing school, adapted for baby dragons. How to hold them properly, supporting their weight without restricting their movement. How to read their body language, understanding that flattened ears meant scared, not angry, and that tail wagging was excitement, not aggression. How to comfort them without dominating them because babies needed to feel safe, not conquered. The Emperor was actually a quick learner once he got past his initial awkwardness. The first time he successfully swaddled the silver dragon, He looked so pleased with himself that Katie had to hide a smile. Here was the ruler of 12-star systems, proud of wrapping a blanket correctly. The palace staff had started giving the dragons names. The crimson one became Ember, the obsidian one became Ash, and the silver one became Spark. Katie thought the names were a bit on the nose, but she had to admit they fit. Then came the night that changed everything. Ember got sick. Not just a little sick, properly ill. He was running a fever, his breathing was labored, and he wouldn't eat. The Imperial physicians rushed in with their scanners and medication injectors, arguing about treatments and running diagnostic programs. Katie took one look at the terrified hatchling and the panicking doctors, and made an executive decision. She picked Ember up, wrapped him in 2 heated blankets, and sat down against the wall with him tucked against her chest. "Everyone out," she said quietly. "But we need to," one physician started. "Out. Now." They left, muttering protests. Everyone left except Emperor Kralith, who stood in the doorway watching. After a moment he came in and sat down beside Katie on the floor. "Tell me what you're doing," he said. Katie kept one hand on Ember's chest, feeling his heartbeat and breathing. Keeping him warm. Monitoring his vitals the old-fashioned way. "I'll give him fluids in a bit when he's calm enough to drink. But mostly I'm just being here so he knows he's not alone." They sat there through the entire night. Katie dozed off a few times but always woke up when Ember shifted or whimpered. Kralith stayed awake the whole time watching. Around 4 in the morning the Emperor spoke quietly. "On my world we hatch alone. We fight to survive from the first moment we break through our shells. The weak die. The strong live. That's how it's always been." Katie adjusted the blanket around Ember. "Dragons aren't like your species though, are they?" "No," Kralith admitted. "I'd forgotten that. Or perhaps I never truly understood it." "Nothing survives completely alone," Katie said, checking Ember's breathing again. It was getting steadier. "Everything starts vulnerable. Your people just built enough technology to skip past that part. Humans never did. We never got advanced enough to forget that babies, no matter what species, need someone to care about them." By morning, Ember's fever had broken. He was sleeping peacefully, his breathing normal, his color better. The Imperial physicians ran their scans and confirmed what Katie already knew. He was going to be fine. After that, something shifted. The Emperor didn't just learn techniques anymore. He bonded with the dragons the way Katie had, through patience and genuine care. Ash, Ember, and Spark started responding to him the same way they responded to Katie. 6 months later, Katie found herself standing in the Imperial court wearing formal clothes that felt completely wrong after months of dragon-appropriate scrubs. Emperor Kralith was making an announcement that was being broadcast across the entire empire. "Today we create a new position," he declared. "Director of Developmental Care for the Draven Empire. This person will teach all species within our borders that power and technology mean nothing if we forget how to care for our young." He looked directly at Katie. "And our first director will be Katie Walsh, human, who reminded us what we'd lost." The formal ceremony was broadcast everywhere. But the footage that actually went viral on the Galactic net was taken later that night. Security cameras caught Katie asleep in the nursery, 3 adolescent dragons curled protectively around her, while Emperor Kralith sat in a chair nearby, reading a book with a worn cover. Someone zoomed in on the title, "Basic Pediatric Care, a Human Nursing Textbook." A human diplomat, probably laughing the entire time, added a caption that spread across 1,000 worlds: "Never underestimate a species that still remembers how to love."